President's Day 2026. We're going to be talking about a couple different presidents today. We're going to be talking about the founding of our nation. This is the Semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And throughout this year, I'm going to be having lots of different live streams, things of that. We're going to be talking about a couple different presidents today. We're going to be talking about the founding of
how you doing?
Is that you? This is the Semi-quincentennial.
Who else would it be?
250th anniversary. That has the thing on the background of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Thing in the background.
And throughout this, oh, never mind, it was me.
Okay, I'm glad it's not me.
Like, what in the world is going on? Yep, I'm related to John and Quincy Adams. Nice, pretty cool, Miss Aloha. So what I want to do is I want to go over a couple different things. We're going to include one person that is not a president. And I know if you're looking at the thumbnail, you're going to say, well, that's Ben Franklin. Well, that is Ben Franklin, and we are not going to be talking about Ben Franklin. Those are the faces of our money. And that is the clue of the person that we're going to be talking about today. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a few moments. But Tiger, how are you, good sir? Happy President's Day. How are you today?
Happy President's Day to you too, Frosty. I'm doing good. Enjoying time home with the wife and having a nice day with my buddy over here.
Did we lose you? I think we might have lost him. You pushed mute, dude.
No, I did that.
Yeah, you hit your keyboard. You hit your space bar.
I'm doing good. I'm spending time with the wife, and I'm spending time with my friend up there. So happy President's Day to you too.
All right. So me is all over this. I wouldn't expect anything else from you. So the person that we're going to be talking about absolutely is Alexander Hamilton. We'll talk about why. If you know anything about our channels. But he is the one non-president that we're going to be talking about today. We'll talk a little bit about why in just a few moments. So, Tiger, list of presidents. One of the ones you and I have talked about over time, many, many times, is going to be one of the first ones that we bring up today, and that is Andrew Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me your thoughts on Andrew Jackson.
Serious kahunas.
Exactly. Right.
This man had been in so many duels, and a lot of them was over his wife. He married a lady that got divorced. Allegedly, her first husband was an alcoholic and an abuser. And even though that was not cool, even in those days, a divorced woman was considered almost as bad as a working girl. So, and Andrew Jackson got married to her, and a lot of people would say certain things, and next thing you knew, they were facing down the wrong end of a barrel. And he's killed a lot of men. Not only in duels, but he was also involved in the War of 1812, back when England was trying to retake America. Battle of New Orleans was his big one, if I remember correctly. And he, being our, I believe he was our 7th president. So would not let the bankers take over the country. Went to war with the bankers and was winning. Unfortunately, he only stayed, I believe, 2 terms.
So you tied something in. You guys are going to see a framework of today's conversation. As we're talking about the presidents and the people within this, remember, there's going to be a little clues dropped. We already talked about Hamilton. We already talked about potentially why. But there is something about Andrew Jackson that you talked about really quickly, and that is bank war, right? The
Oh, yeah.
campaign to dismantle that second bank of the United. And one of the things, and I see me was like he was kind of a bit of a butthead. No, not a little bit. The dude-
he made
the-
he
uh,
made he
yeah,
made Trump look like Trump has no kahunas.
yeah, and so so okay, now this is where I love this conversation, folks. This is exactly where I want this to go. These are the little tidbits that I love. Old Hickory, aka Andrew Jackson, okay, is the reason the Democrats haven't asked for a mascot. Okay. these these are fun conversation topics. And this is exactly what today is going to be. It's going to be a fun session where we just talk about some of the things, learn some interesting tidbits, find out people's opinion of some of these presidents. We talk about our opinion a lot. Today is more about just having that conversation. So if you guys know these little tidbits of information, throw them in chat. This is as much your conversation as it is ours. We're just hosting the forum. Here's the thing. If I'm going to do something that's going to pull in a bunch of people, talking about presidents right now probably isn't the topic that everybody wants to see. But for those of you who are here, this is something of interest. Join into the conversation. That's what today's about. It's about small community. It's about the people who want to remember our history, want to remember those items. And me said, I'm driving, so I can't participate. No problem, dude. You take care of yourself. Keep your eyes on the road. But the whole point of this,
Are you going vertically also?
no,
Okay, because I don't see him.
you don't see who.
Me.
WWIDH.
That's me?
That's me. What would I do here? Yes, that's me.
Okay.
Remember when they changed all of those nicknames? They
Yeah, with
got
the
rid of all the
acronym.
aliases. Yeah, that's where
Right.
that come back at. Me was his
Okay.
alias. This is
Okay.
where trying to remember people from, last month is so hard. His story, Luther, that's exactly right. Or her story, depending upon the person. But yeah, and again, it's one of those things that this is why I like numismatics, right? This is why I enjoy um, the study of numismatics and coins. These are the history. These are the lessons. These are the things that I want to share with people. Because when you hold a coin in your hand, when you hold a bill in your hand, these people done something. What do they do, right? And it's just a quick reminder. Sometimes we forget to remind. Well, I take this back. We kind of screwed ourselves when we changed our money from art stuff that we have now.
Hmm.
Our old money was art. It was beautiful. It
Oh
was
yeah.
it was it was very nicely done. People took time and really generated some very good, neat items that really represented who we are and where we stood in our nation. Um, and so a lot of these people that are here had a hand in the economic construct of the United States. So that's kind of part of the tie. This is why Alexander Hamilton, who's the founding father of our American financial system, is going to be included in this discussion because we are stacking and collecting channels. Tonight, we're going to be doing Stack Collector. We have something that is quite different than this. But again, it's opportunities for people to share. So make sure you're seeing us tonight. All right, let's go ahead and move over to Alexander Hamilton. So, Tiger, shoot. What are your thoughts about this man?
Well, until I became a stacker, I never paid much attention to him. But then when I started doing YouTube and I started doing stories about money, I found out who in the heck he was. And true, he was never a president, but he was just as powerful.
Absolutely.
Why? Because he had control of the money. And the one that controls the purse controls the power. But he also pulled us out of a lot of problems. We were uh, near bankruptcy, mainly And no disrespect to the guy right next to him, Ben Franklin. He printed a lot of money on his printing press and put us into inflation. And then they fixed it and they learned a lesson. And I personally think that's why we have Article 1, Section 10 of the US Constitution. But he also gave us the ratio, the initial ratio for our country of gold to silver of 15 to 1, which is that's the way it stayed for many, many, many years. So he basically took us from a baby nation into one that was starting to get respect. Plus, on top of that, George Washington and your story that you presented about us getting our very first mint, and him stealing his wife's silverware. But basically, he pulled us out of the fire because when a country goes bankrupt, you know people move in for the kill.
Agree.
Financial instability always seems to be coinciding with war. So, what more do you want me to talk about?
Well, I'm just looking at some of the comments in chat. Know it all. The real truth of the matter is, as I know it, that the financial element in the larger sense has owned government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Tiger?
He kept the bankers away from us for a while. They tried taking over. He put them in their place, and then they started moving back into position after he was no longer in office. Um, but it's always been that way. Governments put themselves into trouble and bankers pull them out, and then bankers technically own the country. If you look at not even our country, you go back to uh, King Philip, I think the sixth or seventh, he owed buku dollars to the Knights Templar because of his wars that he had, not only with England, but with other factions in his own country. And his way of trying to take care of the debt was to eradicate the Knights Templar. Uh, it's always been that way. Governments tend to overspend. It always happens
And why do you think that is?
because they have power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Typical.
So it's the sin of man to think that he's bigger, badder than what he really is, and to exercise his muscle even when he has to borrow money to exercise the muscle, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Andrew Jackson, the reason that he's here is because he really tried to fight against. That's exactly right, Miss Aloha. Against greed, right? He genuinely wanted the strength of the nation to remain with the nation, not necessarily in the hands of the few. And obviously, with YouTube me, he's a bit of a butthead. Yeah, he absolutely was. But sometimes you need that to understand kind of where we're at within. We've seen that with a couple other presidents over time. We're not going to dig too much into that right now. But I want to think about what was going on during Hamilton time frame. I want to get back to Hamilton. And I want to ask Tiger, what is your understanding of the Federalist Papers?
Oh, I'm not that familiar with the Federalist Papers. I think they preceded a lot of our country's documents, um, but I don't know a lot of details about that. I apologize.
That's okay. So they are what they call the definitive interpretation of the Constitution. And so, what does the Constitution mean? What does it stand for? What are the pretenses? What are the contexts in which things are? And Alexander Hamilton was one of the people actually did this. Obviously, you know about his duel with Aaron Burr, 1804. Um, this reminds me, there is a counterfeit coin that Jack Young frequently shows. It's 1806, but there's also an 1804 dollar. And that 1804 dollar always reminds me of this duel between this particular person and President Burr. Um, but he genuinely was one of the most powerful and economic leaders of our time. One thing about Alexander Hamilton was that when Washington, and we're going to be talking about Washington here in a little while, and I did a story on this, actually wrote a story talking about the standing up, the founding of the United States Mint in 1792. And George Washington going to the person who he would choose as the first director of the United States Mint, David Rittenhouse, and said, you know, hey, David, I want you to look at this. Threw a bunch of stuff on the table and said, what is it? Like, well, it's junk, basically. Coppers from Massachusetts and an old beat up piece of silver that used to be a 8 Royale. It's been clipped and cut and chipped, and there's little wood tokens and wood nickels and a whole bunch of other stuff. What about it, sir? And he's like, it's trash. The United States is still calling itself sovereign while standing on the backs of the financial monarchy, still utilizing the money of the kings of old. And together with Alexander Hamilton, David Rittenhouse found a building. They made the first U.S. coins. And so it was because of Alexander Hamilton and a little pilfering of some silver from Martha's little hutch. We'll talk about that story later. That basically created the first coins within the United States. So what's fun about President's Day is if you really start to look at the intertwining of history between these gentlemen and these ladies, it's amazing to find out what happens and really kind of tie the story into why do we stack? Why do we collect? What is it about the American coinage? The fact we're talking about 200-300 years, 400 years, it's microscopic in the scope of history. And we have to remember that when we make decisions as a nation. And I can imagine being in a position of having to try to found a country, found a sovereignty, a sovereign state. And what these people did over time, yes, it wasn't perfect, but they made it to be improved. There's just something about that makes you go, we need to preserve our history. We need to make sure that we maintain, because history is written by the winners and losers, right? We need to maintain our stories. And again, I will say this a number of times throughout this broadcast. This is for, for the folks of you that want to know about history. You want to learn some interesting stories. You want to drop some tidbits and information. I don't expect a lot of people here today. I don't expect a lot of views. I don't care. I want this to be an available opportunity for those of you who want to chat about this. And it's the Semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Declaration of Independence. This was one of the many things that helped secure our effect, the Mandela effect. We can get into that later, Luther. But I want to do this. I want to have lots of conversations throughout the years like this. So please, type stuff in chat, ask questions, make statements. Let's have a good conversation. I appreciate it. We're going to go to Ulysses S. Grant. Let's do that one next. What do you think of that man?
Great general, helped get us out of the Civil War. He didn't do so well financially. I don't remember all the details, but he kind of set us back financially. The details I'm not that in depth on. Um, Let me see if I can try to recall something. Um,
So
we had
real quick, while you do that, I want to ask a question to the folks in chat. So why why was he elected a president? What was it about Grant? And you don't have to answer this, Tiger. This is for chat. What is it
okay.
about Grant that basically secured his seat as a president? So I want you guys to talk in chat, just kind of converse amongst yourselves and answer that question. We'll get to it here in just a minute. But think about what it is. Why was he listed as a president? Um, you talked about making some choices. We'll get into some of the bad choices here in a second. But go ahead. I just wanted to interject that real quick. I apologize.
No, no problem. Our very first taxes came from Lincoln because he needed money for the war effort, and then they stopped the taxes. I think maybe the taxes came back under Grant's presidency, although I'm not really sure about that. I think he wanted us to go more towards a paper currency and get away from gold and silver, which I think put us maybe into an inflationary status, if I remember things correctly. How well am I doing?
Well, you're doing good. And here's the thing. This is why we're having discussion. It is time for us just to chit chat. That's
Okay.
very nice. Very cool, Platinum Maple. Nice to see you. It's a beautiful day here in southern Texas. Ulysses S. Grant, extremely good general. Absolutely true. Had a very hard time with the integrity or the identification of the reliability of people. He was terrible at it. He could not judge character as far as he could pick somebody up. Um, he was a bad choice of character. He was a great man. He was a very trusting man. He tried to do a lot of good things, but he surrounded himself with people whom did not know necessarily what they were doing and absolutely had ulterior motives. His brother basically jacked him up pretty good in a lot of controversy. He had subordinates all the way through his presidency that were wrong. And history always goes back and look at him and goes, was he more about his own moral courage than he was about equality? What was his issue? And the thing about this that I want to talk about today is when we look to our leaders, and I'm not going to get philosophical, I'm not going to get overly political. It's just a comment and just a statement. When we choose our leaders, we have to be careful choosing them on the greatness of their actions in or around an event. So if we choose them based off the deeds of a singular action, he was a great general. But if they would have looked at the merits during his time as a general and understood that it was a concept of strategy and sheer will and determination and not of understanding the structure of the system and what helps grow a nation, he didn't have the right skill set to be a leader. Oh, I take it back. He had a great skill set to be a leader. It was just not that leader.
Okay.
And this is what we have to be as any civilization. It doesn't matter where we come from. When you choose leadership, be careful to choose people based off of the merit of somebody else's word or their action, a singular action. Well, they did this, that secures it with me. Look at the history, make assessments, ask questions. Tiger, you and I have talked about something, and I mentioned this with a couple other people. In fact, there's maybe going to be a discussion on my channel soon with somebody if I can shore up the details. regarding something that is lacking in today's society. Not with everybody, but with a lot of people. And that is critical thinking.
Oh, okay, yeah, we talked about that.
Okay, we've talked about critical thinking quite a bit. And when I look at some of the things that Grant did, he did a lot of great things as a general. He was an extremely good military leader. His military prowess, his understanding of the battlefield, great. We'll talk about that in just a few moments.
Okay.
Yeah. But we'll explain why Washington was chosen during that time frame here in just a few minutes. So when we look at this, we just as a people, be critical in your thinking. Look at some of the good things. Look at some of the bad things. Not every president we've had has been completely bad. Not every president we've had has been completely good. But they have their merits. We have to identify what their merits are. But we need to look at these things objectively before we vote. So do your due diligence. When we put leaders in office, understand what their contexts are, understand what they're trying to do, understand the discussion against whatever that is. Right? It's important for us to make, because we are the ones that vote. We're the ones that put in office. Well, thoughts on that, Tiger?
There's a lot of truth in that. The downside is that with our two-party system, we typically don't have the best options to choose from. But then again, sometimes I wonder, giving people multiple options, they can't get past a binary mentality. So I think that's a double-edged sword.
So one of the things, and I was watching a discussion on, I don't want to go too, but they were talking about voting buttons, right? And taking away party names and just listing the name of the people. Because when you do that, if you don't know who the person is, it's hard to choose a line. What's up, T-Bird? Member for 13 months. Appreciate all the support. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. But the whole, again, we're not going to get into this overly political thing. I just want to remind everybody, when you choose your leaders, do so with tenacity and with tact. Look at the whole picture. Make up your mind. Once they're in, do what you can to support them, even if that's prayer. Just do what you can to support them. Because once they're in, whether you like it or not, they are your president.
We do
And
that a lot in church.
well, exactly. Yeah. And so, but again, I don't want to get too much into that. I want to just, let's go ahead and get back into the general discussion. But it's something that needs said. All right. So that's why he's there. Next one, Thomas Jefferson, our third president. Give us a rundown, Tiger.
Don't know a whole lot about Jefferson. I have to admit that. I know, I knew he was our third president. He is part of the name of the college I went to, Washington and Jefferson, but I don't know much about him. I have to admit that I'm a little short on that one.
So one of the things that I've done on my channel is something about the commemorative half dollars. You know that I've done a huge series about that. Still not done with it. I actually need to get back and finish that series. I've got about a little bit more than half done. I probably about 70% on that structure. But one of the things Thomas Jefferson, exactly, he paid down the debt, right? That's one thing that he absolutely did.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
remember that.
yep, doubling the size of America in basically overnight. Paid $15 million for one of the greatest things that actually caused problems, but there were some atrocities that happen every time expansion happens. It's just a matter of life, matter of fact. We understand that. Doesn't matter where it's at in the world. When a nation grows, there's problems. That it's just going to happen in terms of growth. And one of those happened from the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase, they $6 an acre, something to that degree, an amazing amount of money at the time, but pennies on the dollar for what it was worth. And Thomas Jefferson actually went and sat with the leadership in France and said, "Hey, we want to buy this. We want to do this. You own this. You guys have issues with Spain. We're trying to push Spain out. They've got that area down in Florida. We're trying to build this sovereignty. We know you guys are suffering from a series of wars. You need the money. Let's work it out." He had already looked at wanting to get rid of it, making some coin from it, and there again we got um, uh, the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase opened the door for another commemorative coin and two people that we know. And actually, because of that journey, we actually have our dollar coin, and that was the Lewis and Clark expedition and the introduction of Sacagawea. So,
Oh, because they met Sacagawea. I was wondering where you were going with that. I thought you were going Lewis and Clark, but I wasn't seeing the connection.
yeah. And so, again, a lot of these things tie into a lot of our coinage, a lot of our money. This is why the images are here. This is why very early in the beginning I said, remember that these ties to our money, these ties to our early things are in our American coinage, they're in our American history. Our coins are actually little historical mementos if you take a minute to understand why that person was. This is the tie in to the whole presidency. Um, and so Thomas Jefferson, that westward expansion, and of course, again, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, me says he's personal, um, um, his personal favorite was Thomas Jefferson. So, and he's also the founder of the University of Virginia. Now, a lot of people don't like Thomas Jefferson. Any idea why?
I think you partially said it. When a country grows, it gets uncomfortable in different areas. I did a video not long ago mentioning the Manifest Destiny, and Louisiana Purchase was part of it. But there was a lot of um, really bad things that happened during the whole Manifest Destiny. And I kind of mentioned what we're going through might be a brand new Manifest Destiny under this administration. But other than for that, I'm falling short.
No worries. And again, we're not here. This is more about uh, discussions of the presidents and getting community involved and getting people to chat. Um, was it his French involvement? He did have some French involvement. Again, he utilized this. There are some other people that were tied to this, that were tied to Washington. One name in particular, when we talk about the French and the engagement in that, is Lafayette. Right, Lafayette was another person who was really engaged in um, uh, patriot, chasing his own um, success, very similar to what we talked about here in a little while ago when it comes to Grant. Right, very much that same general idea of a person. Um, did some really cool things and tied relationships together, and it was a lot of those early engagements, a lot of those early relationships that allowed us the discussion opportunity to actually get the Louisiana Purchase. But the Louisiana Purchases, as we talked about and what Tiger alluded to, was that there were a lot of atrocities that happened. In the two videos that I did regarding Lafayette, and that we talked about the westward expansion, and something that it was the singular one act that basically doubled or triple size, basically outlined our country with purchase. And it was huge for our nation. And but there were a lot of things that and his political ideas often stood against what people thought of him as a individual, as a man. So there are some things that are there that were problematic, but again, Overall, I think he was a brilliant president. Did a lot of amazing. But one of the people who has some sort of disagreement. A lot of people don't like him because of some of his. Thomas Jefferson, Michael Stacking, I ask you to join with me in prayer that he will so enlighten the minds of your servants, guide their counsels, and prosper their measures, that what they do shall result in your good. That's a great quote, Michael. And again, there are a lot of interesting things. Platinum Maple says Thomas Jefferson sponsored the Kentucky Resolves, opposing strong federal government. Again, that's true. Yep. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects to never, was and never will be. Let me say that one more time. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. I've never heard that quote. I'll have to look up that one. I have not seen it. But I do want to correct a conversation about the whole French fries. Do you guys know where French fries were born? That is a really interesting question. I do know the answer to it. They were born in Greece.
I know a story about how potato chips came out to being.
No, they were born in Greece. I, I
Oh, bad joke. Sorry.
terrible dad joke. Yeah, you kind of just missed that one. Jack Stacker, what's up, brother? How are you? I need to follow up with you. We need to get a live. I should have brought you up here for. And folks, by the way, Jack Stacker is in chat. Make sure you guys go over and sub up his channel. He's been a great supporter of the channel, so make sure you run over and check. If you want to check, feel free to throw your channel in there. And he's like, I can't because I'm not a moderator. I will do it. All right,
Yeah,
drop.
Chegg is a pretty good egg.
Yeah, Chegg is at 723 subscribers. I want to get him to 1,000. We need to get him 280 subscribers. We'll have him on. We'll push his channel. We want to get him to that mighty 1K. So any help from supporting him would be great. He puts a lot of information out. A lot of cool things on check-based coinage too. So a lot of fun. Absolutely, check. Again, it's all about history. We all have different understandings and specialties and things, and to have people who like certain aspects. I like to learn, so I appreciate it. Let's see. Let's go to the next one. Now, here's a discussion. You and I had a difficult time with this, and I want chat to answer this. The next two presidents we're going to talk about, we had to kind of vie back and forth between who would be number one and who would be number two. It's a very difficult decision.
Yeah.
I have my reason for this. But what I want to ask is, we have other presidents that we're going to talk about following these two. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. These are the next two that we're going to have discussions. Here's what I want chat to do. Which one of those two, if they were your favorite, they may not be, but if one of those two is your favorite, why? And hey, Nana, what's going on? Good to see you. So let's talk about the merits of George Washington.
Pretty much won our country from the British. He had a hard time. It was between him and another general to basically be general of the army. Eventually, it was Washington that had won. I think it was because the win at Valley Forge is what turned that tide. He was our first elected president. They wanted him to be king, and he refused it. He didn't want to be a king. He wanted to enjoy his free time from those responsibilities, and really didn't really think that we needed to have a monarchy. Um, so then, if you consider that he fought in multiple conflicts, multiple wars for this country, even as he was after being president, um, plus things like him stealing his wife's silver to give us some of our first coins. Um, he's a very giving man for the country. Basically, even though he didn't die from war or from England, or he gave his life, his living energy into building this country. What's your take?
Um, if I had to look at the merits, and again, me said this earlier, and this is something, if we were to judge people by their acts as a leader, Washington wouldn't have been my go-to if I was looking at his successes. Washington didn't have a very good track record. He wasn't the most brilliant general of his time. He was something that we lack in today's society, and it's a word that when you as a man or you as a woman sees something that is above and beyond integrity, and it's called magnanimity. Washington had magnanimity. Magnanimity is something that is an integrity, a level of understanding, a level of insight to, I don't want to be the leader. I will stand up and fill the gap if I have to, but I don't want to be the leader. Washington voluntarily relinquished his power after a couple terms. He wasn't forced out. He wasn't told. He said, I did what I needed to do. I would like to turn the mantle over to somebody else to fix any shortcomings that I may have had. I would like to live out my days in peace and in solitude, knowing that our nation is indeed free. And he voluntarily relinquished that. He set the precedent for peace while maintaining power. A failed military leader in most rights made the absolutely best choice, president. Not because of what he could do, but because of what he knew needed done. I tell the story again, going back to Rittenhouse and the founding of the mint, the throwing of the change on the table. What is this? We are suffering ourselves on the graces and the money of the tyrants of old, the kings and the queens, in which we just separated ourselves from. Our entire financial system is based upon. He knew that if we were going to be taken seriously, we had to set these things up. It wasn't his prowess as a military leader. It wasn't his understanding and his government understanding of the concept and the structure of a nation. It was, hey, you know what? We screw a lot of crap up. We need to fix this. we probably should work on some of these things. I'm not so good as a leader, but you know what? Here's some problems. Let's do this. And what Washington did better, way better than Grant, was Washington had a very good understanding of the integrity of him. He knew it. He understood it. And that was something that made it very difficult for me to go, do I choose Washington or do I choose Lincoln? So let's shift over to Lincoln real quick. Let's talk about Lincoln and some of the merits of him.
he was supposed to be a man that had a lot of integrity. Um, uh, he kept our country together during its, in my opinion, worst war ever. Brother against brother, the Civil War. Um, and in the end, he was murdered, and maybe for that. So he did give his life for this country. And not only did he serve it, but if I remember correctly, the first I think he ran for president once before and lost, or was that a senatorial position? Uh,
I think he lost the Senate a number of times, and then his first bid for president, I think he won. I don't remember that one. I'd have to double check that one. I don't recall that. If somebody in chat knows, let's know.
but no, he kept our country together when it was falling apart, and he chose for us good generals to go up against General Lee, who was exceptional and was winning the war for the South. Um, we would have been two different countries if it wasn't for him. And a house divided can't stay very strong. So he kept us. Could you imagine different foreign countries trying to manipulate after the Civil War, trying to whittle their way into power over here? That's
Well,
to
I
me
mean, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to declare our sovereignty, right? Is to avoid that. We wanted to make sure that we maintained um, that actual independence, right?
true.
Yep. Now I'm reading a lot of chat. There's a lot of people who don't like Lincoln, and this is actually something that I found very strange a while back. And the more that I researched some of this stuff, I understood some of the reasons why people like him.
Okay.
Um, and it isn't all about where you're located in the United States either. A lot of people assume that people in the South don't like him because of that. There's some of that, but not really. That's not really the issue. A lot of the issues, and Mies talked a lot about it, was he utilized some of his aggression to ensure that what he felt needed to be done was done. He served very quietly, but very much like Andrew Jackson. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that part, but I'm not surprised because sometimes you need, well, to deal with the assholes of the world, sometimes you have to turn yourself into a bigger asshole than them.
Agree. Yeah, and so one of the major issues, and this is one of the reasons why I had always chose Lincoln as my number one, always. Um, I like what he did. I like the Emancipation Proclamation. I like the fact that his idea of the war wasn't just to preserve the Union, but it was more the ideal of human freedom. He was responsible for ensuring that the external actors didn't come in and support any one side during the Civil War. He kept this a national issue. But there were a lot of things that, in looking at it, a lot of people just don't like Lincoln. They really just don't like some of the stuff that he did. Um, I will not condemn a man for the great acts that he's done, and I have to give props for one thing, and that is one of the most famous things throughout history. It's something that in many classrooms still today, something happens, and that is the reading and the understanding of the Gettysburg Address. I think that if I look at Lincoln and I look at all the stuff that he did, good or bad, it all comes down to the Gettysburg Address for me. 272 words in which he really redefined what the American entity, what the American identity was. And again, I have told you that there are failed qualities in every one of these men. Every one of these men had their faults. Every one of these men struggled. Not one of these men was perfect. Washington, a failed military leader by all rights, was probably one of the most magnanimous men in the history of the leaders of our nation. Thomas Jefferson really worked to generate a construct in which we could increase not only the size, but really fight and write what independence was. Again, the semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration, he was the principal author. So Thomas Jefferson, a key leader for many. Abraham Lincoln, still a key because of what he's done throughout many aspects. People don't have to like it. But the merits of a man need to be remembered. The atrocities of a man as well. When we look at some of the other ones, Tiger's going to talk about another president that him and I both enjoy. We'll go over Ronald Reagan. A lot of people didn't like Ronald Reagan. A lot of people did. Tiger and I both happen to like Ronald Reagan. So why don't we talk a little bit about that little piece that you're showing right now?
This is 999's fine. I actually came across, I have a tube of them. Whoops, it's not in the camera.
I need to try and find some of those. I still don't have one of those.
I'll work at trying to find some. But basically, when I first looked at it, I'm like, what? Roosevelt looks different. And finally it dawned on me, that's not Roosevelt, that's Reagan. So I looked a little further, talked to Chavella, who I bought this from, and found out that it was actually made kind of to show the Congress a potential for a change in the dime away from Roosevelt to Reagan, which I personally would have enjoyed. And, it never really quite happened. I understand from talking with you that his wife Nancy wasn't a big fan of it, and she kind of put a stifle to it, which I think was an outright shame.
Yeah, that one guy, thank you so much for subscribing. I guarantee I appreciate that. Look at that. We got another one, 7260, only 40 away from 7,300. I appreciate all the support, folks. Yeah, so that is an interesting story. Do you want to kind of dig into that a little bit?
Well, you and I talked about this, and this I'm not sure if it really revolved around Nancy being upset with Jane Wyman or not, but yeah, evidently Reagan's first wife, Jane Wyman, he possibly was still in love with. And
Real quick. Rain Dancer, thanks for subscribing. Appreciate you. Go ahead.
and Nancy wasn't a big fan of that previous relationship or the potential for emotion still being there. And maybe that was the source of her telling the Congress not to use her husband's effigy as the new potential dime.
So let's give some context to the audience regarding what we're talking about. So, for those of you who aren't aware, Ronald Reagan was married prior to being married to the First Lady Nancy Reagan, and that was to Jane Wyman. Jane Wyman and him were both actors during the time frame. Reagan had political aspirations. Her career was going very well. absolutely loved each other. It's just that their paths didn't keep them on the same path. And in fact, after Ronald Reagan died, Jane Wyman would show up to his funeral. Now, Nancy always knew that Ronald Reagan, or Ronnie, as he was affectionately called, um, always cared about her. It was something that she knew, and I don't. There's depending upon where you read, sometimes there's dissension about this. Sometimes There's not. Um, but I know from uh, my studies and a little bit of our history that there was some dissension there. There was some dislike of that because again, uh, he was always uh, Ronald Reagan was always his first love was always Jane Wyman. They never stopped caring about each other. It's just that their paths died. But what happened in that particular thing? Lift that dime back up again, or it's not actually. It's just a 10th ounce round. It's not actually a
True.
dime. Um, but what happened was they wanted to propose this, so they created this bullion effigy of Ronald Reagan, and then actually submitted a proposal through Congress to change the dime from Roosevelt to Reagan. There was actually a proposal that was done to ensure that was there. And then when we look at this, which is really, really cool, um, he said no. He's like, I don't think that he would really appreciate that. Um, Unfortunately, they had to succumb to her whims and say that we are not going to put that on there. And Ronald Reagan was subsequently not put in place of Roosevelt. But it definitely was a consideration at one time. So those are just commemorative pieces now. They're just silver rounds. They are not coins. They are not authorized by the United States Mint. But they are cool mementos of a discussion that was had revolving putting Reagan on the dime. Now, I absolutely supported that idea. I think that would have been great. I like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, World War II, Pearl Harbor. I was stationed there while in the military. And again, there's a lot of historical context about why I like Roosevelt. Reagan did a lot of amazing things for our nation. And one of the things that stands out for me with Reagan, and again, ties ties him and Lincoln together, and actually one other person on the panel there. Um, he was also shot while trying to grow our nation. Um, Lots of reasons behind that one. I won't get into the why, but this is a really cool coin that represents an attempt to get Ronald Reagan onto U.S. coin. I think it's a really cool piece. I wish it would have went through. Genuinely, I wish it would have went through. Um, what are the things that think about when you think about Ronald Reagan? Type. Oh, hold on, real quick. Know it all. I was also stationed at Pearl. How you doing, shipmate? The WWIDH was also a Navy vet. Before we move on, I want you guys to do me a favor. If you ladies or gentlemen served or currently are serving, put a thumbs up, an American flag, just like we're in there. Let us know. Represent. Let us know who you're at. Submariner, extraordinary. I got to tell you right now, man. 3 months on a sub, you got to be a unique character. Salutes to you. Thank you for your service. This is the Silent Fleet, as they call them. They are genuinely tip of this. Thank you so much for your service, Noah. And for all the quotes and the context in chat. All right, Tiger, go ahead, please, and check your text.
Okay. Hold on, check my text. All right, let me work on that too. But he was uh, he was a very good speaker. Uh, he actually he was an excellent athlete. He eventually got into radio, and if I remember correctly, he went by the name of Dutch or Duke. Maybe it was Duke. Um, and eventually he was getting interviewed to be an actor, and they didn't like his name, Dutch or Duke. And he says, "Well, actually, my real name's Ronald." Uh, and they loved that name, so they went with that. It was during the early days of Hollywood. They He got to meet a lot of very impressive people, including really big names, because back then actors didn't flip flop between movie companies. If you were with MGM, you were with MGM. You didn't go to any of the other ones, and vice versa. And they would all gather like around lunchtime or something in one big general cafeteria like situation. And even though Ronald Reagan wasn't, the big known actors like Clark Gable and all that, they all rubbed elbows in the cafeteria. Well, he learned a lot about that, and he got involved in the Screen Actors Guild. That's where he started learning about his joy for politics. Then he went to, if I remember correctly, I think he became the president of the Screen Actors Guild, and he got more and more and more involved in politics, and that's kind of what led towards him and Jane Wyman separating, because she wasn't so much into the politics. So she and him split as he became more and more politically active, and then he started getting more involved in regular politics. And if I remember correctly, he started off as a Democrat, and certain things were happening with um, spending more money rather than trying to spend less, trying to make bigger government instead of smaller government, and he didn't appreciate that, so he ended up switching to the Republican Party, and was very well renowned for trying to get certain people elected in as president. Who was it? I think it was someone running against Nixon at the time, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong with that, but that was the story as I understood it. And then he went for he ran for president and lost. I believe it was against Ford, but Ford recognized his potential, so that but he let Reagan give speeches and all that type of thing, which allowed him to get even more notoriety, which allowed him to then later come back against Jimmy Carter and win after Ford lost to Jimmy Carter. Um, he inherited a mess. We were going through a lot of financial problems, most likely because Nixon took us away from the gold standard completely. And it was during the time when, the interest rates were jacked up pretty high in order to get control of inflation. Um, he did keep our country financially sound, but it did have some side effects, because you can't fix one part of the economy completely, because always something else breaks. So I looked that up a few days ago. I wish I retained all the details of that. So, what's your take on him?
Well, there were a couple things about Reagan I really liked. One of it was his understanding of, again, we talk about integrity. his surrounding of people, his writers. He had extremely good writers. But what I really liked about Reagan is his ability to explain things in terms that people could understand. He was really good at it. He really was able to enlighten people, and I loved some of his jokes. You're talking about um, his debate, Walter Mondale,
Oh yeah.
and one of the conversations is it's like, hey, we've watched President Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we've seen this kind of action. Will you be able to do this? You're one of the older presidents. And he looked at me. He looked at the person and said, let me tell you that at no time will I allow age to become a factor in this presidency, or the fact of my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Yeah, and Mondo just
He
burst.
just looks at him and smiles, right? Because it's like, what do? You can't say anything about that. And he did it with tenacity, and he did it with tact. He was in your face in a very kind way. And he reminded me of a leader, a very good leader, who ended up becoming a deputy surgeon general of the Air Force, whose name was General Sean Murphy. And Brigadier General Murphy, I think he made an additional rank. I can't remember if he became lieutenant general. And um, when I worked with the Air Force many, many years ago, he was a leader that corrected me in such a manner that when it was done, I actually felt good about myself. And I watched Reagan do this a number of times with our nation, where he laid it out there that said, this is the problem that we have within our nation. And when you were done, after he basically told you all the things that were wrong, you left feeling good about yourself. You left knowing that there was opportunity, that there was somebody who was going to do about it. And
He
that's what I found fabulous about Reagan. Um,
even did that with Gorbachev. Do you remember this one? Doviai no proviai.
okay,
Okay, I thought maybe you would, being that you're married to a Russian lady.
I do, and we've talked about this a number of times,
Okay,
but elaborate for the
trust
group.
but verify. He
Yep.
learned that that's the way the Russians worked. He learned that phrase. He lived by that phrase, and he made Gorbachev live by that phrase. And every time he said that publicly with Gorbachev, Gorbachev would just chuckle, says, "You say it all the time." And he did. Doviai no proviai. Trust,
And
verify.
yeah, and again, it's utilizing the items that were relevant to the conversation. But I also loved Reagan's humor. Reagan, one of my favorite jokes is about the kittens. And he changed it to dogs later, but it was a kitten joke. You know that one?
I think I do, but I probably don't remember it well enough to tell it. You probably do.
So the kitten joke went something like this. Have I ever told you about the boy who was selling kittens outside of the Democratic National Convention? And of course, the crowd erupts during this clip. And it's like there's this boy outside, and he's holding up these little kittens. He says, "Buy a Democratic kitten, buy a Democratic kitten." And they were there, and maybe one of them were. And then a week later was the Republican National Convention, and one of the reporters saw this kid, and the kid was out there saying, "Buy a Republican kitten, buy a Republican kitten." And the reporter walked up to him and said, "Hey, a couple of weeks ago, you were here saying buy a Democrat kitten, buy a Democrat kitten." He says, "Yeah, that's right, but now their eyes are open."
That's right. I forgot the punchline.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things, and it was just like it was done. There were mean things said in a sarcastic and fun way. He brought light to the discussion, but he allowed people the opportunity to discuss. It wasn't some of the stuff that we see where it's like, "Oh, I can't stand you," or "I hate you," or "Ah." It was you know, it was a discussionary piece. And this is where I think that Reagan excelled in this. Now, one thing that I also want to say about is his platform joke. Have you ever heard the platform joke?
I don't think so.
So he said there was a politician who went to this old Iowa farmland. And in the Iowa farmland, he seen this old farmer. And he said, "How you doing, sir? I'm a Republican going for office." And he says, "Well, I've never had a Republican out here." He says, "Well, I'd like to talk to you about it." He's like, "Well, me and the missus, we're pretty much hardcore Democrats. Um, but if you want to talk about it, you can go over there. I'll put a piece of board up on that mound, and you can, climb up there, stand on that board, and you can talk to whomever wants to show up." He says, "Okay." So they take this little piece of 2x4 and put it up against this dung heap, set this board up on top of it. It's nice and stable, the top of it's flat. And he gets up there and he starts talking about it. And he gets down, he says, "Well, like I told you," he says, "there wasn't much interest in your topic." And he says, "No, but it was an experience." And he says, "It's an experience." And he says, "Yep, that's the first time I've ever gave my point of view from a Democratic platform." Anyway, so he really played with the humor of it and made light of the situation. He tried to really get back to the brass tacks and talk about what the issues were. And so that was one of the reasons that I liked Reagan. I really did enjoy Ronald Reagan and the stuff that he brought in. Now, again, he's another one of those that some people just don't like. There's a lot of people that just didn't like President Reagan. They didn't agree with his policies. But he has to be up there on my top 3 or 4 for certain.
Oh, I agree. I agree. In fact,
Bill,
if you look at a lot of my shorts, they're quotes from they're auditory quotes from Ronald Reagan.
another Navy brothers in the house. Good morning, Copperal. How are you doing, good sir? Hope you were doing well. We have a lot of Navy represent. We got Airedales and subsurface and anti-surface warfare. Lots of great people. Thanks for being here today. The last one we're going to chit chat today, and again, there is no particular order of these presidents, but the last one is going to be, yeah, that is a crappy joke, Blaine. But again, so thanks for being here, Blaine. It's great to see you, by the way. Um, one of the things about presidents is, how they stood in face of adversity. What did they do? And the last one that I want to talk about is somebody that we can't talk about decent presidents, even without controversy, because again, every one of these men were flawed. None of us are perfect. Nobody has the perfect presidency. They've all made mistakes. So none of the people represented, even the ones that aren't present, or Hamilton, um, we're all flawed, but we can be used in many different ways. And the last person is Kennedy. I think we would be amiss if we didn't talk about JFK.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts about JFK?
Um, well, he had both strong and weak, as they all did. Um, he came from a family that built themselves up from nothing, and then got into politics. He walked into another type of a mess. His predecessor, Dwight D. Eisenhower, pulled him aside and told him about I'm probably going to say this wrong, the industrial military complex,
Okay.
and pretty much advised him not to let them take control. Um, he also signed an executive order for us to be able to have foreign gold, which was a partial countermand to uh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's executive orders. Um, Evidently, he had a thing with Marilyn Monroe that Jackie wasn't quite so happy about, and I can't blame her. Uh, but he also,
Birthday to president.
don't do
Yeah.
that. That just makes me think of you being in rap. That's so wrong.
Oh, too much fun.
Anyway, but he ended up handling the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis in a really good way. We could have been in another big war back then, and somehow he pulled it off. As I recall the story, he had Bobby do a lot of the Cold War stuff behind the scenes to keep it from escalating. And the military people were telling JFK to attack Cuba, which I'm sure would have been a spark for something a whole lot bigger, and he didn't. Um, then that might be, although I'm not the best historian, that might be the reason why he might have been targeted for the assassination. Although I don't, like I said, I'm not really sure about that part, and we're going to find more out as those files are gone through and publicized.
Yep.
But um, he was one of three major assassinations in the 60s. Him, his brother Bobby, and Martin Luther King. All three of which were very popular figures in our country at that time. And it looks like, mm, and this might be just conspiracy, but then again, it might be proven as the documents are gone through. Might have been our own our intelligence agency that snuffed them all out just to keep the status quo. I may be wrong, but I think he would have done a really good job if he was allowed to live and continue. But we'll never know.
So one of the things that I see, JJ Gold talking to Gold Maple says a gentleman does not cheat on his wife. And there are a lot of people who don't like. Now again, every one of these men that we talked about is a failed man at one aspect in their life. Every one of them. And no, I absolutely know what you meant, JJ. Yeah, it doesn't. One of the things that is very clear, and I want to bring this. We talk about Stack Collector again. That's going to be tonight. I hope you guys can attend. We're going to be talking about if you guys know who Nick's Coins is. He's going to be on talking about something that is something probably not discussed. A lot of you, matter of fact, let's ask this: how many ladies are in the house? If you're a lady, sound off because this is going to be targeted towards you. It's going to be directed towards you.
Was
So
since you imitated Marilyn Monroe, do you get the sound off too?
say that again.
I was saying, since you imitated Marilyn Monroe, when you said "ladies sound off," does that mean you get the sound off too?
Hey, yeah, but no.
And
So
if I may jump in on that comment from JJ, yeah, what he did was wrong. There's no doubt about that. But and forgive me, I'm going to get slightly religious here. Lucifer will hit any person in the weakest link in their chainmail armor, whether that's sexual or alcohol or drugs or greed or love of power. The Lucifer will attack and attack and attack. And some men, not many, can fight for a lifetime like that. A lot of them will fail. We all fail in something. And, what he did was wrong. But as long as he went, and you cannot share my opinion if you don't want to, but as long as he went to Jesus and asked for forgiveness, if Jesus forgave him, I'm good with it. So I think he did a really good job. So, you know, that's just my take on that one. So let's continue.
No worries. So one of the things that you talked about with the three major assassinations within the 1960s is the civil rights. And in 64, he passed a landmark bill that was primarily due to something that was a filibuster. It's one of the longest ones. It's not, I don't think it's the longest one, but it was 54 days. And they filibustered until the bill passed in the Senate on July 2nd, 2 days prior to the 4th of July, 1964. And they did have to have an amendment on it. But the whole thing about that was that this was one of those things that kind of put that, I think, put him on the map. When you're looking at the three different assassinations attempts that happened in the 1960s. But I have something down on him when we talk about the economy. During his time in, GDP growth was up from 2.2 to 5.5%. Inflation remained the same. It didn't increase under Kennedy. The industrial production rose by 15%. The gross national product increased by 10%. The disposable American income went up. Unemployment rate went down almost 20%. Wages and salaries were up 10%. Our nation profited under Kennedy. There were some issues, but he did improve the overall economy. That was one of the big things that he did. Another one was, ladies out there again, Equal Pay Act 1963. This was signed into law June 10th, 1963, where he tried to abolish the wage disparity based on that sexual disparity, right? So the problem has always been around. It's still a concern. It's still an issue today. But he was the one that really set the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1838 with a new amendment. And again, that was signed into law June 10th, 1963. The one that he talked about, Tiger talked about moments ago, obviously was the Cuban Missile Crisis and the nuclear ban treaty in Moscow. This was one of those things that almost led to World War III. A lot of people don't realize that there's been a couple times, once in the 80s, once in the 60s, where we were just moments away from World War III. And this was one, quite literally minutes away from that ship carrying that missile, the Cuban Missile Crisis, crossing that parallel. It was a very tumultuous time. And again, not to look at the single actions of an individual person, but how they contribute in times of stress. Kennedy absolutely handled himself during those hours with tenacity intact. He absolutely stood for our nation. He stood up. He held the line. And I think he was the reason that we didn't get into World War III during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Him and Bobby.
Say again?
Him and Bobby. He used Bobby to do a lot of talking behind the scenes.
Yeah. But that was the one he definitely looked at calm. He didn't react. He didn't act rashly. He set the blockade up. He put the rules in there, and he talked to Khrushchev and said, look, you cross this, we're going to do this. It'll be declared an act of war. We know you don't want to do this. Get your missiles out of Turkey, or we'll get our missiles out of Turkey. You get yours out of Cuba. We will walk away from each other's doorstep. We will back our stuff off, and we will let calmer heads prevail. And it was that singular action that I think that defined Kennedy's presidency. I think that was the thing that, in my opinion, defined him. There are other people that say, well, I can't stand for the merits of the man because of what he did. I understand that. But every one of the people that we've talked about in one facet or other of their life was a failed person. The whole premise for this, the whole reason for this discussion is that every one of us has the potential, despite our flaws, to make impacts. Every single one of us, like the presidents that we've talked about today, those who aren't a president, but every single one of us has the opportunity to act in good faith, to make decent decisions, do a little bit of research, to act and not react. Despite every one of our flaws, we all have the capability of doing something great. These people who helped found our nation, these people who helped govern our nation, these people who helped direct our nation, serve as a reminder that even though the leader can exhibit failed qualities, good can come from their administrations. And instead of griping at the things that we don't like, stand behind and find out what we can get behind, and let's make a change. We have an opportunity to better our nation. Let's do so. Like people or not, we have to look at the merits of what they're doing.
Because if you want a perfect president, there's only one candidate, Jesus. Outside of that, we're all flawed.
Fact. But just because we're flawed doesn't mean that we're not good. Just because we're flawed doesn't mean we don't have the opportunity to be better. Just because we're flawed doesn't mean we don't have the opportunity to make it. And every one of us has our own little whatever. Folks, on this President's Day, I want to leave you with one thing. First off, thank you for being here. We've had about 20, 25 people on average over the course of the last hour hanging out with us, chit-chatting, putting stuff in. Know-it-all has been dropping tons of great quotes from the various leaders that we talk about. I greatly appreciate that. For all the military men and women who've come in and said hi, thank you. But Tiger and I want you to know that we're going to have a lot more of these discussions over the course of this year. And if you're really interested in the history of our nation, tell us those things that you're interested in. I've got a video coming out next week on Monday talking about another battle, talking about some strategies, talking about the American Revolution, talking about some of the documentation that was founded in our nation that helped us understand the direction we wanted to go in. We're going to ask some questions throughout the course of the year. Where have we done well? Where have we not? We're going to look objectively at the 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're going to look a lot about coins. We're going to talk a lot about precious metals. We're going to talk a lot about finance. We're going to look at things a little bit differently. But all of it is for naught if you guys don't watch. Tear it out. Tiger and I have goals to grow, but we have goals to pour into you, to teach. We want your feedback. We want your insight. Because without you, we're just wasting breath. Copperell coins. My grandmother grew up across the street from Eisenhower, where Ike lived in Abilene. So yeah, still Ike out there. Need more POTUS chair. Need more Ikes in the POTUS chair. Ike was a good leader. Ike was, again, a lot of people surfaced in the times that they were needed. Others, they didn't necessarily do such a great job. But remember, it's up to us. We're the ones that make the decisions, right? We have the capability to.
I agree. A little side note, Gold Maple. Gerald Ford was only in office for a very short time. He inherited a mess. Inflation was climbing because of coming off the gold standard. He took the hit for that, but he took a hit for something else. He pretty much sacrificed his political career by pardoning Nixon, which a lot of people were very upset about, but in retrospect, it was the right thing to do. It took a nation that was tearing itself apart and gave it the glue to come back together. So I have a lot of respect for Gerald Ford. Plus, his executive order, December 31st, 1974, when he gave gold back to the citizens, took away all of the anti-gold executive orders from FDR. He gave it back to us. So when you say he's blah, please consider everything that he did in such a very short period of time. And personally, I think he would have done a whole lot better than Jimmy Carter if he was elected. But that's my personal belief.
Well, and here's the thing. Not every one of us is going to agree on who was a good leader. And you know what, folks? It's okay to disagree. It's okay. We can do that. It's not a problem. What we need to do is be able to come and have discussion. And again, I told you guys at the very beginning, I didn't expect a lot of people to be in this stream. This wasn't one of those big ticket items that I was hoping that I would have 4 or 5, 6,000 people come into the stream. My numbers are going to be small. I bet you we have barely over 400 people that have popped in here over the course of this. I don't care. What's important is having the discussion. That's ultimately what this is about. Having the opportunity to talk about some of these things so that we can, again, share the information, remember history, and remember why we do the things that we do. Right? Engage the youth. This is another thing that we need to do. Tiger and I will be talking more about that on Stack Collector as well. So join us tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. We're going to bring in Nick's Coins. We're going to be talking about stacking from the stay-at-home mom's perspective. If you guys know moms or grandmas or stuff like that, please come join us. I think that it's important if you have daughters, granddaughters, things of that nature, and they want to know how they can stack and collect and do that kind of stuff just by doing some of the stuff that they do at home, please share that out. Okay, let's blow this up. Let's show Nick that she has something that a lot of people would be interested in seeing. Let's go support her, and let's push some Stack Collector. All right, folks. Tiger, you have any closing remarks before I wrap things up?
A couple things. Please, in this stream, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the bell notification. Leave a comment. That will prevent YouTube from taking you out and thinking you're a bot. Second thing, if you'd be so kind, go over to my channel and subscribe, hit the like, go see a video, leave a comment, same reason. We work really hard at trying to bring you a lot of great information, and we want to build ourselves. This guy up here, he's past 7,000. I'd like to see him get to 10. I would like to see me get to 5. So if you'd be so kind, please do that. Tomorrow, I'm releasing a video about a state that is pushing cash. I'm not going to say any more than that. So if you want to hear about a particular state in our country that's pushing cash, I have a feeling that you're going to find it very interesting.
Matter of fact, let's ask that question to the folks in chat right now.
Okay.
Have any of you ever gone to a grocery store, a convenience store, a gas station, something of that nature, and they told you that you could not use cash? If you have, you probably want to be a part of this discussion.
I'm also planning on doing a follow-up to that. I just got to figure out which direction I want to go. Also, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a live stream with Sean's Precious Bullion. We're going to talk about fractional. And Frosty, you're welcome to come up on board if you want to. But that's been set already for Wednesday, 7 p.m. So do you have any upcoming projects?
I do have a number of things I'm going to do. We're going to be talking about some stuff. I've got some some more stuff regarding the semi-quincentennial. So just pay attention to the community post, and we'll make sure we do that. But I want to leave you guys with a word a little story, just kind of a little summary of something I wrote regarding one of the presidents, and this is for Thomas Jefferson. And with this, I will be ending. One evening, while grappling with the complexities of the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson's secretary noted that the president seemed quiet. Jefferson leaned back while tapping a quill against his chin. Am I being accused of overstepping the call? Jefferson mused for a moment. Am I the man who wrote that governments are instituted among, deriving that their powers from the consent of the governed? He realized that in this moment, the presidency was merely a sequel to the first act of authorship. To him, the Declaration wasn't about breaking up the letter to King George III. It was a living promise. Whether he sent Lewis and Clark into the unknown, or whether it was the fighting for separation of church and state, he felt that he was still just polishing a draft. By the end of his term, he knew something. And that was he didn't want to be remembered for his title or for the land that he required. He wanted to be remembered as a writer. He already begun the draft. 250 years later, we celebrate the Declaration of Independence. Happy 250th anniversary. Yours truly, the President of the United States. Interesting. A man who did so much would look at this document as the defining moment of who he was. The pen had always been mightier than the office. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you being here. Share it out, like, subscribe, and we will talk to you guys later.
Thanks everyone for coming.